You have never made a single decision in your life. Sit with that for a moment. Let the discomfort settle. Your immediate reaction is to reject it. Of course you make decisions. You chose to read this. You chose what to eat this morning. You chose your career, your relationships, the words you spoke yesterday. But here's the problem. If you actually made those choices, you should be able to explain how, not why. How? Try it. Think about the last significant decision you made. Now trace it backward. Where did the desire to make that choice come from? You didn't choose to want what you wanted. The preference arrived. It appeared in your consciousness like a notification on a screen you don't control. You experienced the wanting, but you didn't author it. This seems like a philosophical trick, doesn't it? A clever game of words designed to confuse rather than illuminate. But Richard Feynman, the physicist who helped build the atomic bomb, who decoded the mysteries of quantum electrodynamics, who spent his life demanding that ideas survive contact with reality, stumbled upon something that shattered his confidence in the most basic assumption you carry with you every waking moment. The assumption that you are the one doing the thinking. Let's start somewhere comfortable. You know you have a body. You can see it, touch it, feel it ache after a long day. And you know you have a mind, that invisible theater where thoughts play out, where memories surface, where you experience the sensation of being you. These seem like separate things. The body is physical, measurable, made of atoms. The mind is something else. Something that observes, that chooses, that exists somehow beyond the mechanics of flesh and neurons. This distinction feels so obvious that questioning it seems almost absurd. You are a mind piloting a body. The body is the vehicle. You are the driver. But Feynman couldn't leave obvious things alone. He had this maddening habit of poking at assumptions until they bled contradictions. And when he turned his attention inward, not to physics, but to the experience of his own thinking, he encountered a problem that no equation could resolve. Here's what he noticed. When you have a thought, you experience it as something you produced. I think, therefore I am. But Feynman started watching his thoughts more carefully. He would sit quietly and observe the moment a thought appeared. And he discovered something disturbing. He could never catch himself creating the thought. The thought simply arrived, fully formed, like a guest who enters without knocking. You can test this right now. Close your eyes for 10 seconds. Try not to think of anything. What happened? Thoughts appeared anyway, didn't they? Random images, fragments of sentences, a melody, a worry. Where did they come from? Certainly not from a conscious decision to think them. They emerged from somewhere you can't access, somewhere beneath the floor of your awareness. So if your thoughts aren't authored by the you that experiences them, then who is doing the thinking? This is where the ground begins to shift. Because the question isn't really about thought at all. It's about identity. It's about the strange loop of consciousness that allows you to ask, who am I? While simultaneously being the one asking. Feynman realized that this loop might be an illusion, not in the sense that experience isn't real, but in the sense that the experiencer might be a product of the process, not its origin. And that changes everything. Consider the body for a moment. Not as a philosophical concept, but as a machine. Your heart beats without permission. Your lungs expand and contract while you sleep. Your immune system fights invaders you'll never know existed. Digestion, circulation, hormone regulation. All of this happens with exquisite precision, and none of it requires your participation. You don't decide to heal a wound. The healing happens. Now here's the uncomfortable question. If the body can do all of this without the mind's involvement, how much of what you consider your actions are equally automatic? More than you want to admit. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet conducted an experiment that should have made headlines everywhere, but instead got buried under the weight of its implications. He asked subjects to move their wrist whenever they felt like it, while monitoring their brain activity. What he found was this. The brain began preparing for the movement about 550 milliseconds before the person consciously decided to move. The readiness potential, the neural signature of "I'm about to do something," preceded the feeling of deciding by half a second. Read that again. Your brain starts acting before you decide to act. The conscious decision, the feeling of "now I'll move," arrives after the process is already underway. You're not the commander. You're the narrator, constructing a story about commands that were issued without your consent. Feynman never knew about Liebert's experiments. He died in 1988, just as this research was gaining attention, but he had already intuited the problem through his own introspection. He noticed that when he tried to observe his own decision-making process, he could never find the precise moment of choice. There was always a gap, a darkness. The decision seemed to emerge from a place his awareness couldn't penetrate. Think about what this means for free will. You believe you have it. Everyone does. The entire architecture of human society, law, morality, relationships, personal responsibility, rests on the assumption that people choose their actions. But if the brain decides before consciousness reports the decision, then what exactly is choosing? Maybe the mind isn't the driver after all. Maybe it's the passenger who believes they're steering because they're holding a toy wheel that happens to turn in sync with the road. But wait. This can't be the whole story, because you certainly feel like you're making choices. The experience of deliberation is real. When you weigh options, when you imagine different futures, when you struggle with a difficult decision, something is happening. That something isn't nothing. Here's where Feynman's approach becomes crucial. He never accepted an explanation that contradicted experience without offering a deeper account of why the experience felt the way it did. Saying, "free will is an illusion," explains nothing if it doesn't also explain why the illusion is so convincing. The question isn't whether you feel like you're choosing. You obviously do. The question is what that feeling actually is. And this requires looking at the relationship between mind and body from a completely different angle. What if the distinction itself is wrong? What if asking, "Are you a body with a mind or a mind with a body?" is like asking whether a flame is heat with light or light with heat? The question assumes separation where none exists. It imposes a boundary on something that might be, in its deepest nature, seamless. Feynman spent his career demonstrating that nature doesn't respect the categories humans invent. Particles are waves. Waves are particles. The universe operates according to principles that defy intuition. Why should consciousness be any different? There's an experiment you can do right now that will demonstrate something strange about your own existence. Raise your hand. Go ahead. Actually do it. Now ask yourself, what just happened? The standard story goes like this. You read the instruction, your mind decided to comply, your mind sent a signal to your body, and your hand went up. Mind first, body second. Cause and effect. But that's not what the physics says happened. What actually occurred was a cascade of electrochemical events. Photons hit your retina. Signals traveled through your optic nerve. Neurons in your visual cortex fired. Language processing areas activated. Motor planning regions engaged. Electrical impulses raced down your spine. Muscles contracted. Your hand rose. Nowhere in this chain is there a gap where something non-physical intervenes. It's neurons all the way down. Every step follows from the previous step, according to the laws of physics and chemistry. There's no moment where a ghostly mind reaches into the machinery and pushes a lever. So where are you in all of this? Feynman grappled with this relentlessly. He once described the brain as a computer made of meat, but he knew that couldn't be the complete picture. Computers don't wonder about themselves. A thermostat regulates temperature without experiencing what it's like to be cold. Something about the particular arrangement of neurons in a human brain produces not just information processing, but experience. The redness of red, the sting of rejection, the peculiar ache of nostalgia. Philosophers call this the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problems, explaining how the brain processes information, stores memories, controls behavior, those are merely complicated. Given enough time and research, science will solve them. But explaining why any of this processing is accompanied by subjective experience, that's different. That's hard. Because no matter how completely you describe the mechanics, you still haven't explained why it feels like something to be a brain. Here's an analogy. Imagine you had a complete map of every neuron in someone's brain, every connection, every firing pattern, every chemical gradient. You could predict their behavior perfectly. You could know, with absolute certainty, that in 3 seconds, they'll think of their mother. But would that map tell you what thinking of their mother feels like to them? Would you know the quality of their experience, the specific texture of their nostalgia? You wouldn't, because experience isn't in the map. It's not anywhere you can point to. And yet it's the most undeniable thing in existence. You can doubt everything, the external world, other minds, even your own memories. But you cannot doubt that experience is happening. Something it is like to be you exists right now as you read these words. This is what disturbed Feynman. Not that the mind might be reducible to the body. He was comfortable with materialism. What disturbed him was that consciousness seemed to be simultaneously undeniable and inexplicable, present but invisible, real but unlocatable. He started thinking about it differently. What if consciousness isn't a thing inside the body at all? What if it's what the body does when it reaches a certain level of complexity? Not a ghost in the machine, but the machine's way of knowing itself. Think about a whirlpool. You can point to it, you can describe its shape. But is the whirlpool a separate thing from the water? Or is it a pattern the water makes? If you remove the water, the whirlpool vanishes. If you freeze the water, the whirlpool vanishes. The whirlpool exists only as long as the water moves in a particular way. Maybe you're like that. Maybe the mind doesn't inhabit the body. Maybe the mind is something the body does. But this still doesn't answer Feynman's original question. If you are what your body does, then who is the you observing the doing? The whirlpool doesn't know it's a whirlpool. The pattern doesn't experience itself as a pattern. Yet here you are, aware of your own awareness, conscious of your own consciousness. How? This is where the investigation turns back on itself. And this is where Feynman's disturbing discovery finally reveals its full shape. He realized that the question, are you a body with a mind, or a mind with a body, contains a hidden assumption. It assumes there's a stable you that possesses either one or the other. But what if there is no possessor? What if the sense of being a self, that continuous, unified observer who seems to live behind your eyes, is itself a construction? Not the foundation of experience, but its product. Consider dreams. When you dream, you experience a complete world. You move through spaces, interact with people, feel emotions, and crucially, you believe you're awake. The dreaming self has no idea it's dreaming. It takes the dream world as reality, because the dreaming brain is constructing both the world and the self that perceives it simultaneously. There's no external observer checking whether the dream makes sense. The observer is part of the dream. Now wake up, look around. What makes you so certain this is different? You are not a mind observing a body. You are not a body generating a mind. You are the process by which the universe becomes aware of itself through a particular temporary arrangement of matter. The boundary you feel between inner and outer, between self and world, That boundary is drawn by the very process that creates the feeling of being someone who could draw boundaries. Feynman glimpsed this in his notebooks, in his late-night conversations, in the margins of his physics. He kept circling back to a single overwhelming recognition. There is no separation. The atoms in your body were forged in stars that died before Earth existed. The patterns in your neurons follow the same mathematical structures that govern galaxies. The electricity in your thoughts is the same electricity in lightning. You are not a visitor here. You are the universe looking at itself. And this is why the question itself dissolves. Asking whether you're a mind with a body or a body with a mind is like asking whether the dance is the dancer or the dancer is the dance. The question assumes a division that experience unifies. You are neither the possessor nor the possessed. You are the possessing, the process, the happening. This doesn't diminish you. It reveals you. You thought you were a small thing, a fragile mind trapped in a mortal body, separate from the vast, indifferent cosmos. But you're not separate. You never were. The feeling of separation is what the universe does when it becomes complex enough to model itself. You are the cosmos, experiencing what it's like to be a localized pattern, wondering about its own existence. Feynman died without solving this. Nobody has. Maybe nobody will. But he left something more valuable than a solution. He left the question in its most honest form, stripped of comfortable answers, freed from the illusion that you already know who you are. Tonight, when you lie in darkness waiting for sleep, notice the thoughts that arise. Watch them appear and vanish. Ask yourself who is watching, and when no answer comes, when you find only silence where you expected a self, don't be frightened. That silence isn't emptiness. It's what you actually are when you stop telling yourself stories about what you are. The body breathes, the mind wanders, and somewhere in between, something witnesses both, neither inside nor outside, neither physical nor immaterial. Just this, just here, just now, awake.